We are halfway through the year and halfway through the Euros. Investment markets have been playing ball so far this year, but how can we get our multi-asset portfolio match ready for the second half? Today, I'm joined by Harriet, who's back from maternity leave to give us her portfolio management tactics. Hi, Harriet. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
So I know that you're spending quite a lot of time at the moment with the multi-asset desk, thinking about where markets could go in H2. And I'd imagine it's as difficult as trying to pick the winner of the Euros, right? I'll ask you for your pick at the end of the episode. But how do you think that we win in markets in H2?
I think, as investors, we spend a lot of time trying to think about what's, the right answer to the questions. But I think, very important first step is thinking about what are the right questions. So to answer your question about how to win in the second half of the year, which is obviously a question we all want to know the answer to, I think we should break it down into the different sectors and think about the questions underneath.
Okay, so maybe we should delve a bit more deeply into those questions then. So shall we start with equities? We've seen, a big rally in equity markets. Obviously, the S&P 500 has been up 16% in sterling terms this year. It's been all about those magnificent 7 tech stocks. And everybody wants to know if that equity rally is going to continue, right? So what are some of the key questions that you've been thinking about to sort of answer that bigger question for markets?
Yeah, as you said, there's been really strong performance, and a lot of that has been underpinned by a good backdrop for equities, where the global economy has managed to avoid recession, and we've also had an improving inflation outlook. I think in the second half of the year, earnings need to do more of the heavy lifting, and so that will be a question for equity markets. Can they do that? And will the economic and inflationary environment continue to generate support for equity markets and allow the rally to continue?
Okay, let's maybe move on to bonds then. So look, we haven't seen those rate cuts we were expecting in H1, but we have seen some progress on inflation. I suppose, what I want to know is, will we see rate cuts in the second half?
Yes. So, obviously central banks are expected to cut rates in the second half. Markets are pricing that in as well. So across the UK, the US and Europe, the market's expecting those central banks to cut rates twice for over the rest of the year. But the key for bond markets is actually more about how policy will evolve relative to the current expectations. So relative to that expectation of cutting twice, will central banks cut those 2 times that the markets are expecting, or will they cut more than that? And actually, movements in the bond price for the rest of the year could even be driven more by changing expectations for rate cuts in 2025 or even 2026, where the economic outlook is less certain. So the key question is more about how policies will change relative to market pricing.
Okay, so lastly, I can't let you get away without asking you about elections. It's a huge year for elections. It's the largest percentage of global population ever going to the polls. And we've not been disappointed, have we, Harriet, so far this year with some of the political surprises. How do you see politics feeding into markets in H2? And are you seeing uncertainty potentially there?
Yeah, I mean, markets love certainty. And obviously, as you said, political events create a lot of uncertainty. And so it's not surprising that you're going to see an increase in volatility around these events, and that volatility feeding through into markets. Obviously, the key question for politics as investors that we're thinking about is how these different political outcomes will alter the economic outlook that markets care about. And, the answer to that question will differ depending on the manifestos and the policies that the different candidates in each country are kind of looking at and going to bring forward. Normally, you're going to be focusing on the fiscal stance and the extent that could change the economic outlook. But then, you've also got bigger policies, in the US with Trump potentially getting in. You've got broader global economic ramifications of policies around trade if Trump were to get in. So there are lots of things for markets to be focusing on. but it's likely to create some volatility yet.
Really interesting, Harriet. Thank you for your time today. That's all we have time for. If you're looking to dig into a little bit more deeply into those questions that we've been talking about today, we will be releasing our quarterly house view document in a few weeks' time. And what we'll do there is give more depth around those questions and some answers as well. So one last thing before we go, Harriet, who wins the Euros?
I don't know that much about football, but I know that England is still in. So I'll say England and be hopeful.
Fingers crossed. So thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next week for another episode. Take care.